First to introduce myself, my name is Claire Miller. I'm the Deputy Head of Data Journalism at Reach PLC, which used to be Trinity Mirror until we bought a load more newspapers and changed our name. I feel we're probably warming to a theme here on this idea of data journalism very much as just being journalism. But in my case, because I work for a regional publisher and because I also work with the Mirror, the audience for which I'm aiming my data stories at is possibly a bit different to some of the other guys on the panel, because it's very much a regional audience and sometimes it's a tabloid audience. So it's very much about making the data interesting and engaging and something that people are going to want to read without terrifying people with loads and loads of numbers. So this might be a bit of a whistle-stop through some of the things we do with the data unit. Hang on. Firstly, just to kind of do a quick history of how I got into data journalism and sort of how it kind of has grown in the UK as a part of journalism. This is obviously the Guardian data blog, which was the thing that basically inspired me to start doing data journalism. And obviously it was a day-to-day kind of roundup of most interesting stats and data journalism, which kind of led me to create the Wales Online data blog, which was basically a regional idea of the same thing. And I think the key point with this is to kind of emphasize that you don't need a massive team to do data journalism. I have a team now and they're brilliant, but you can do so much as an individual. There are so many free tools, there's so much freely available data, that getting started as a data journalist is actually really easy and something you can create amazing things doing without having to have a developer and a designer and all of those things. So on this idea that data journalism is just something that we've always done crime figures, we've always done exam results, we've always written about these things, we've always done budget calculators, but the development of digital journalism means we can do much more interesting things with our data journalism. So instead of having a little table in the paper, we can have a nice calculator that you can put your information in and get back a result that's personal to you. I think that's really how journalism has changed in terms of data journalism. It's gone from tables and papers to interactives and much more interesting digital presentations of journalism we've always done and we always will do. So, quick history on what was the Trinity Data Unit. We were set up in 2013. There were just 2 of us to start with. Our remit was to make interesting content out of data, and our view has always been there is enormous amounts of data out there. The ONS publishes huge amounts of stuff every day. Government departments publish huge amounts of stuff every day. We might as well be making really good use of it because plenty of it is local and lots of it has fantastic stories in. So our aim is always to be, how can we get the most out of this? How can we make this information useful and interesting to our newsrooms around the country? How can we do that every day, make this part of the daily news output for our papers? We've grown since we started. We've now got graphic designers and coders and videographers. So we're quite a big team now and we can do much more. So the basic idea hasn't changed. We're always trying to get out as many stories as we can, as good stories as we can, and present those stories in interesting ways. But obviously we can take it a bit further. We can create videos, we can make interesting interactive. So we are basically, as I said, trying to find agenda-centric exclusives, or at least trying to find the best stories we can every day. Because we're journalists, we still love a front page, even though we're digital journalists. So there's quite a lot of front pages in this, just because it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of things that we do every day. Just getting the most important stories as we can onto the front pages of our titles around the country. And we have a lot of titles now. We cover most of the major cities across England and Wales, and quite a few in Scotland as well. So every day we're trying to find those great stories. And it's not necessarily about telling those stories in a way that is very much about the data. We don't really want to overwhelm people with numbers. We're trying to find the way that those numbers will mean something to people. So it's kind of finding the big numbers or the big changes or huge amounts of money or the areas that are doing worse or better than the other places. So it can often seem quite simplistic, but it's about trying to find how will this resonate with people how can we tell them what this data means for them? More front pages. I said, as journalists, we really, really like front pages. So, as well as doing the day-to-day storytelling, which we send out to all of our papers across the group, we also do bigger projects that can involve interactives or more kind of in-depth reporting. So we do make quite a lot of interactive gadgets as well. What we quite enjoy doing is finding really, really obscure data sets buried somewhere on the ONS and turning them into something fun. So this is the census pen portraits, which take down an open output area, sort of like analysis of what the kind of demographics of that output area is. So we decided we'd turn it into a little interactive where you put your postcode and find out what the census was saying about the people who live in your area. So with that, it's about making this like very big piece of analysis into something that people can kind of get their heads around and kind of explore and have a bit of fun with. These are similarly sort of other ones that we've made. Quite often with the first two, the hangover and the how average is your area, sometimes it's about taking lots of data sets, bringing them together and trying to kind of give people an idea of how their area sort of compares to other areas. With the third one is based on the English indices of multiple deprivation, which is obviously a very important big piece of analysis, which comes with lots of reports and tables and things. But it's kind of like, how do we make this into something that we can put on the Mirror website and people will be interested and look at it and get a better understanding of this piece of analysis and what it means in terms of where they live. So again, it's a put your postcode in and it'll tell you in terms of the indices how your area compares. And it did more than 100,000 views on the Mirror website. So for us, a lot of this is about how do we communicate statistics, numbers, to people who don't necessarily are people who would be that interested in statistics. If you said, there's this big report about how deprived different areas are. And if you put it in sort of a format like this, it's more accessible, it's more likely that they'll go and have a look at it. We also use, as I said, we do bigger investigative pieces, bringing together lots of different data sets to try and investigate issues of social and political importance. One of my colleagues, Annie, has been doing quite a lot of stuff on inequality, so she looked at gender and looking at the statistics as well as talking to people in different areas. So going to get case studies that go alongside. So you've got the numbers and then you've got people saying, well, this is what these numbers mean for me in my everyday life. She also looked at racial inequality. And again, she's taken all the data. There's an interactive where people can look at how their different areas vary. And then it was followed up by the reporters at the MEN who found a very strong sort of case study that showed exactly how the issues affect people in everyday life. As well as interactives and big projects and just day-to-day storytelling. We've also got a videographer. I mean, everything we do is designed around how can we make our content as interesting as possible? How can we tell the story better? So we use videos as well, including pictures of weathermen. I like that one, it's forecasting highs of 23 degrees. This, you'll note, was probably back in about April, possibly not in like July. So, as well as doing this, we do a hell of a lot with the data unit. Basically, we've decided that there's so much data out there, we really want to make the best of it in every way that we can. We've started creating daily infographic visualizations. We've now got a small part of the team that does that, whose job is basically to take different data sets and try and visualize them and write sort of content that kind of sums up an issue in sort of visually and with a bit of text. We've got weekly spreadsheets of data pages that do something similar, but on a kind of weekly paper and more local level. So the daily visualizations, infographic ones are national, and then these are weekly breakdowns of, for example, house prices in your area. So basically, to sum up, there are kind of three underlying beliefs that kind of drive us to kind of do all these things and try and tell as many data stories as possible. We believe that data journalism is not a fad or a ghetto. It's just journalism. It's something that can be widely accessed, and we really do believe that when we do stories, they are often deserving of being on the front page, they're often deserving of being on the most read news list. They're not just stories about numbers, they're really important stories about people's everyday lives, which people, we feel, will want to read. We also believe, following on from that, is that by making data personally relevant to our audiences, we can make them care about public interest issues that matter to all of us. One of the criticisms that local press get endlessly is that there's barely any of us left and we don't cover the important issues anymore, and we're all busy building websites that are full of clickbait, none of which is true. But what we feel is that data journalism is one of the ways that we can cover these stories, and we can cover it from a basis of essentially an evidential base where we've got numbers. We can kind of go, well, we know this is kind of changing or happening because we can point to the numbers, and that we can use that to talk about the issues that people care about, that we can illustrate how cuts are affecting places, about how the NHS has been affected and how things are changing there. So we just believe that data journalism is a great vehicle for doing that. And thirdly, we are a journalistic enterprise. We are essentially a team that works with the newsrooms across the country and as part of our company. And it's our job to come up with the best stories we can possibly come up with from the data, to be out there looking for new data, to be out there doing FOIs to get new data, to be just coming up with great ideas for how we can use data in different ways, because we stand and fall by the quality of our content ideas. If they're boring or not engaging, or they don't tell people anything they really want to know, no one is going to use them in their papers. We'll just end up writing stuff that no one reads. So we have to come up with stories that are interesting, that people want to read. And that kind of is very quickly, summing it up. Where can we find important stories that aren't being told by anyone else? Can we help people find and explore useful information about where they live? And can we do this without being boring and nerdy? And we're kind of hopeful that we do, not least because occasionally I get to turn my data stories into full-on tabloid stories for the Mirror, which is always a fun experience. I think that's me done.